And welcome to the broadcast. Our first guest is Savannah Blackwell, who's a provocative investigative reporter in San Francisco, but now currently studying law at Bolt Hall in her second year, and we welcome you back.
Thank you.
You know, I'm not sure whether things have changed. I think things actually have changed since you were here the first time. There was more possibility of uncertainty in San Francisco politics.
Yes.
It just seems like everything has become so complacent or bland or predictable and in effect boring. And you know, you would think that's impossible in San Francisco.
Well, I think that there are many things afoot, and you know, I'm just going to be able to highlight a couple of them. But I think that one thing in terms of, let's just look at what Gonzalez found in that poll that was conducted of him. Matt Gonzalez, the Green Party activist who was thinking about running again against Newsom. That people certainly recognize that there are problems out there, just to enumerate problems with Muni, the problems with really bad homicide rate, right?
Homelessness.
But for some reason, we're not inclined to hold the mayor accountable. Now, I would attribute that to a couple of factors. And I think that the foremost one is, frankly, we don't have an aggressive press to the extent that we really could use one. They've laid it out about Newsom's affair with his secretary and his chief staffer's wife, but then they kind of wrapped it up as, okay, he's going to go to rehab, and they don't really keep holding him accountable, especially for something which I think is the most important part of that scandal, which was that she got paid $10,000 in public money to essentially, go on her way.
Yeah.
And we need to see that focused on that. So Newsom gets away with basically the what he's really good at on a superficial level, which is just kind of presence.
But isn't the press that you're talking about,
Yes.
whether it's a Bay Guardian or SF Weekly,
Yeah.
aren't they part of the problem and not necessarily the solution to the problem?
Yes, they're part of the problem.
Okay, so we're back to the same question. Anywhere you turn right now in San Francisco politics, you get that same bland.
It's a shrug, like, here we are, what are we going to do? Oh, well.
The press is that way.
Yes.
The board's that way.
Yes. Well,
the mayor is that way.
There are some people on the board who are still just plowing ahead with what they see needs to be done in terms of improving the city and running the city. And I think of Aaron Peskin, for example. I mean, he's still has been very aggressive, certainly putting that Muni reform measure on the ballot. He does a lot of just nuts and bolts running of the city. I think, in fact, I feel very confident just in having talked to him that he basically was like, okay, nothing's going to come out of all this stuff with all the guys trying to think about whether they're run. I'm just going to focus ahead and keep moving on. And I think that if he were not that focused, we would see even more kind of just nothing going on at the board, not to diminish what the other legislators are doing, but he really stays focused.
Is this a reaction to the overactivism of the previous mayor?
I think that there is, that was the other thing I was going to pick up immediately is Willie Brown, and the fact that we can recognize during his administration there was so much more attention on what he was doing and, scrutiny really. And at the same time, his character, the richness of his character, I think engaged journalists more. I mean, I can tell you just having covered his administration, as a journalist, he's a journalist's dream. I mean, he's got a million things going on, and the thing is, he's doing it himself. He's not somebody who's just not, Gavin is not as engaged, and that can be said flat out, not as engaged in the running of the city as the mayor was.
The voters and those who answer the polls are accepting this do-nothing style, essentially, of the mayor because they were burned out because of the previous mayor?
No, I think it's not exactly like that. I think what it is that the colorfulness of the previous mayor, and also the fact that he was in a rare situation where he had that incredible bubble, that incredible dot-com bubble, with all that money flowing all around the city. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, it's like the Wild West out here again with people coming in and wanting to do this. Yes, but the perception is that it's not the mayor doing all this stuff.
Correct.
And I think that's in part based on very much factual. And you know, Willie would go before they really clamped him down when he was running for re-election and limited his public availabilities. He would just rip things off and start controversies of his own. And I think the fact that he was such an interesting and compelling character drew the journalists to be more engaged in everything that was going on in his administration. Now throw into this the fact that the media at that time was not going down the tubes. And when you have a situation where the people who still have these jobs at these newspapers are basically, you know, you run into them and they're dear friends of mine, like, man, thank God I still just have a job. Your expectations, your morale is just so much lower. I mean, I really feel that part of what we're seeing is the demise of the newspaper industry.
There was one surprise, and one pleasant surprise. C.W. Nevius comes out of nowhere and attacks the encampments at Golden Gate.
Not that that's entirely a new thing. I think Ken
but
Garcia
it was an example of that in a still pond, and made such a reaction because there was no news up to the time. Everything seemed to be going pretty well, especially the mayor's homelessness programs supposedly were going pretty well, unless you walk the streets. And then you see more. I mean, it's obvious not only in the statistics, but it's obvious in the viewpoint that it's actually gotten much worse. But when he came out, he was an example of an investigative reporter who simply found a story and it really caused a stirring.
What I think that
you're not as happy with the story as I am.
Well, my
He's going to be a guest on this
I've
program.
been through this. No disrespect to C.W. Nevis. I've been through this story before back in 1997 when Willie Brown ordered the sweeps on Golden Gate Park after Ken Garcia wrote columns, I think exaggerating what the extent of the needles and such. And the fact is that,
By Garcia or Nevius?
Garcia.
Okay.
I can't, you know, and the fact that, yes, now there are folks who use Golden Gate Park regularly who think that it had become a problem. Here's what I think happened. I think that there was focus on the park because of the coyotes, right? We were looking at the park and what was going on in the park. Reporters were around there. They started hearing about other problems in the park. C.W. Nevius picks it up. Notice that the timing in terms of the way you can play coverage. You can have a column off on a B section and it goes, forget about it in a couple days. But you splash out big cover stories regularly like they were doing for about a period of a week. Notice that the timing was right up before that filing deadline for the mayor's race. Randy Shaw at Beyond Cron picked up on this, and I don't think he's totally wrong, but I think there was some eagerness on the part of editors there to see a real race. I mean, it's boring for all of us.
Okay,
but
no, I'm going back to your comment that you're saying.
Do you see what that would give somebody an opportunity?
But you can't have it both ways. You can't criticize the press for being complacent, and then when they go out and act the way you want them to act,
because you have to be aggressive all the time. You can't just
have
a big, you know, spout of it 5 days before the filing date.
Well, there's not that many reporters down at the Cron anymore. They've been fired.
I know,
100 of them are gone.
Terrible, listen, I do not know.
So what does it mean, though? Let me stop you there. What does it mean that they have been fired? As a journalist, they've been fired. The L.A. Times fired the San Jose Mercury, the New York Times. Where are we going then? If you think that's part of the problem is that we don't have a loyal press to be critical, well, you have all this alternative journalism.
It's happening there too. So basically, the alternative newspaper industry that's not part of the New Times Village Voice chain is struggling terribly.
Talking about the electronic.
They own the SF Weekly.
No,
you're talking about the blogosphere?
I'm talking about the whole alternative press.
Okay.
Even the newspapers.
Well, we have to separate the alternative press newspapers, established newspapers, from what's happening in the burgeoning blogosphere. Because what I'd say about the deal with the burgeoning blogosphere is, yeah, there are certain blogs out there that are pretty reliable that you can go to for information, but you have to remember, I think that that is not a replacement for what we've had.
But has it become part for this generation why that if they go and make comments on stories, they feel that's the extent of their politics. They don't have to worry about.
You're right. That's an interesting point, one that I hadn't actually thought about.
I mean, you go into that, you're emotional, you write 40 sentences, and you go away saying, you know, I posted something, I got it out of my system.
Okay, so you're reading somebody's, you know, say column, you don't, you know, let us hope that you know something about where it's coming from. Then you go off, right?
For about 10 minutes.
You haven't done anything.
But it was, in the old days, your chance was once at the voting booth. You'd go into the voting booth and say, I've done it.
Well, hey, how about this?
Now
how
they
about
can do it every day.
Involved in various neighborhood groups or things that you care about. That's really where the activism happens, is meeting with people and working with people and not sitting at a computer.
Do you think that neighborhood activism is a substitute for this civic responsibility to be engaged in something more than your personal life and thus, which allows.
No,
I watched Kamala Harris
needs to
this
be
week.
part of it.
Look, I watched Kamala Harris on this station, and I watch Newsom whenever I see him, and these are polished individuals that are Hollywood quality. They've got it down.
Yes, we have 2 stars.
So is that what the voters want?
I don't think so.
Why then are they there, and why is no one running against them when you have the highest crime rate, homelessness out of control again, the munis never worked, and the port is complete financial disaster, and yet it's the most expensive. Everywhere you turn, there's overruns and disasters. What has happened to the San Francisco voter and those who they poll for both of these candidates to be running unopposed?
Well, knowing what I do about why certain individuals did not jump into those 2 races, I can tell you in those 2 cases.
Yes, why?
Money, baby. Everyone was so intimidated by that.
If you're going to be in politics, you have to raise money. It's part of. If you're going to be in business, you have to raise money.
You have to remember that in 2003, we saw Willie Brown's fundraising machine behind Kamala Harris just destroy Terrence Hallinan, and that really.
Are you saying that here and throughout the United States, incumbents now have a free ride?
I think that until we really reform the system and get the big money out of the system, we don't have a real democracy. We get the candidates that we get because there's the ones who are funded. Are those the ones we really want or the ones we really need? No.
The last election proved, and the candidate, Osama, can prove that $25 donations on the web now.
I'm sorry, the candidate, Obama?
Obama, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I did the same thing once, another candidate.
I'm sorry, for a minute I was like, okay,
Obama has proven that $25 donations on the web by individual voters is working. I mean, you can set these things up now. You don't need to go to major donors to do this. Why was that an option for some of these progressive candidates that made that the excuse?
Because I think part of it, to tell you the truth, and I really think it's ridiculous, particularly when you have a time of public financing, but I think it's the psychological impact of just seeing this huge sack of Getty money and feeling like you can't climb up over it. Now that's not. I would say keep do it.
There's a $500 limit in San Francisco.
Right, I would say do it, but I hear them say, "Oh, the money, we can't get past the money, buy all the
But you see, that's me.
But that's not why Chris Daly didn't run.
And
that's
why didn't Mick Arimi, or what about Gonzalez, who had been the leader and everyone was looking to him? Do you hold any responsibility that he had a responsibility because of the people who gave him the support last time to at least carry a banner to at least create a debate?
Well, I think that I said in the article I was very disappointed he didn't run. I think that especially because he stayed in the mix for so long, that I know that it had an impact on, I think, of Ross Mercarimi, who really felt a little very tentative about trying to jump out and put out his hat in the progressive ring if Matt was still sitting on it, and given the fact that Matt had the encouragement and financial support waiting there from the Residential Builders Association.
Were you disappointed?
Was I disappointed?
That he didn't run?
Yes.
Okay. Well, so
because he kept saying that he was like, don't think I'm the candidate, look for other candidates, but if we get to that August point and there aren't any other viable candidates, I really don't think this mayor should be unchallenged. I thought he would stick to that.
Let's hope that this discussion at least moved some people for a few minutes and then go back to their complacency.
Okay.
Savannah Blackwell, good luck in law school.
Thank you so much. Don't go back to the complacency.
Yeah, that's her admonishment. And don't you go away. We'll be back in just a moment.